Now, if I ask you, what do BMS companies do for high availability and disaster recovery that other IT shops should do?
Yeah, that's another great question. There's a couple of things which should be considered, and first and foremost, I would say define your SLAs. Regardless of the industry sector, before customers embark on a high availability project, they should first define the business problems or challenges that they're seeking to solve and the desired outcomes. So this will generally distill into an availability service level agreement, or SLA, that defines how much downtime can be endured until it has a material and detrimental effect on continuous business operations. So the SLA is typically measured or expressed in terms of a number of minutes or hours per year. And the basic premise is that the more critical the operation, the less downtime that you can endure. And the less downtime you can endure, the higher the availability SLA becomes. So SLAs are presented as percentages. So if we say a BMS application is 99.9% available, this is described as 3 nines and equates to accepting or expecting approximately, I would say, about 9 hours of unplanned downtime in a year. 99.99% or 4 nines equates to approximately 50 minutes of unplanned downtime per year. And this is what we generally describe as achieving high availability. And then lastly, 99.999% or 5 nines of availability equates to approximately 5 minutes of downtime per year. And this is generally described as achieving fault tolerance. But what needs to be considered here, however, is that the higher up the availability stack you go, the higher the price points of these solutions become. So for example, if we're building a fault tolerant availability solution for our BMS application, this is going to sound great on paper, but in reality, it's going to be quite a costly exercise. Fault tolerant availability solutions are extremely expensive and will typically also result in solution or vendor lock-in due to the proprietary nature of the components and the systems required for the operation of these fault tolerant solutions, which then have an effect on the furthering the total cost of ownership as well. So to mitigate this challenge, what many BMS customers do is they take a more pragmatic approach in that they will review the business requirements versus the avoidance of any unnecessary costs. And often they end up adopting availability solutions that provide a 4 nines SLA. So these solutions are still going to provide you with an adequate level of high availability protection, but importantly, they can be offered at a more realistic and palatable price points with associated reductions in acquisition costs, deployment complexity, and ongoing management and running costs. So in summary, it's important to sort of weigh up the balance between the required SLA and the overall total cost of ownership of the solution. And then beyond that, I would also say you would want to ensure the success of your failover operations in a failover scenario. So due to the nature of the systems that a BMS solution is monitoring and running, it's vital to ensure that the application failover and failback mechanisms are proven and dependable with a high likelihood that they're going to work as expected should the worst happen. So the last thing we want to deal with in the event of a BMS application failure is a failure of the actual failover mechanism as well. So it's going to leave you with a significant disruption to business operations, and it carries an exceptional risk to business and organizational reputation. So the best practice in the BMS sector, and probably indeed any sector in general, is to develop a business continuity plan or a playbook that includes the regular testing of the failover functions on a regular basis. And for some organizations, this could very well be a regulatory requirement. So it's important that this testing is as close as possible to the real world scenario. When systems are unreliable or overly complex, IT teams may take shortcuts in their testing. So BMS users should look towards high availability solutions that allow for straightforward and automated failover and failback testing without the need for manual intervention or sort of getting hands on keyboards. And that's a strategy that I think sort of many IT shops would do well to be considering as well. And then the last thing I would say there is I would also think about planned maintenance periods as well, and how these are managed. Yeah, we can sort of leverage high availability platforms to manage and minimize planned downtime for aspects such as sort of things like software patching and upgrades. We all recognize that the organizational overhead associated with the maintenance of software solutions is becoming more important and more frequent to ensure the efficient running of an organization's IT systems. If you combine the ever-present threat of things like viruses, malware, and ransomware, and other potential security breaches, with the associated reputational damage and significant remediation costs, these can present an existential threat to a business. And whether this is a BMS application, any associated databases, or even the underlying operating system, using a high availability cluster allows for the idle cluster node to be patched and tested first without interrupting the production activities on the active node. If the patch works as expected, a controlled failover to the idle node can then be executed, which now becomes active. And then the same changes are then applied to the previously active node, which is now idle. And upon successful patching, the application can then be failed back to the original node. And this process can be achieved with minimal downtime when executed and managed in the correct order.